Welcome to Snack Time Chats, a collection of short, podcast-style recordings designed to promote best practice and encourage knowledge exchange throughout the ELC sector. Each session will be led by the Improvement Service, who will be joined by a different guest speaker for each recording.
So thank you so much for joining me today, David, and we're really keen to hear about the LGBT plus education in early years, and I know you've done a whole power of work in South Lanarkshire, and we're just really excited to hear about your experience and talking about how that project got off the ground and where it is now. So it would be really good if you could start with just a little bit about yourself, who you are, how you became involved in the project, and then some background about your project itself. That would be really helpful for people listening.
No problem. Yeah, so my name's David Dick. I've been a nursery teacher now for, I think, 16 years, something like that. And this work kind of started in 2018 when I was working in a setting where I'd been the teacher there for nearly 10 years. And you know, at that time in 2018, you know, the wider context around LGBT plus education was, you know, we had LGBT Youth Scotland, you know, doing their Charter Mark Award in primaries and secondaries. We had the TIE campaign, which was, you know, almost getting LGBT education into the curriculum for Scotland, but it wasn't quite there yet. And we had work by Stonewall and stuff like that. And as I was kind of observing what was taking place in primary and secondaries, I began to think about how that might be able to work in an early years context because of certain sort of legal changes that had happened in Scotland, which had changed the makeup of families that were present at our centres. So things like, you know, joint adoption for LGBT couples in 2009, access to IVF for lesbians in 2009, and then, you know, something like equal marriage in 2014. And I began to think, are our settings, is my setting, really up to speed with diversity and things like that to welcome LGBT plus parents and, you know, support the children in the setting? So that was the kind of starting point for it. And as I looked around, I couldn't really see any other kind of practice in early years settings. So in 2018, I had a sort of taster session where I bought in some storybooks and did a little bit of training with the staff and also got some parent feedback, and everything was really positive about that. And then the nature of my job changed and I became more of a peripatetic role. So when I moved to a different setting, Cathkin, I was also doing my Masters in early years at that time at Dundee University, and I decided to do my dissertation around this, which sort of gave me access to a lot of academic research and different things. And then I was able to expand the project when I was at Cathkin, and you know, that worked really well. And from that, it's you know, the train's now been rolled out across South Lanarkshire. We won an innovation award from the Scottish Government. We won the COSLA Delivering Excellence Award in February this year. So, you know, there's been a lot of kind of interest in this project, and I want to be able to share sort of the methodology and the things that worked really well, so that other settings across Scotland can take this forward, because there are barriers, I think, around some of the issues that need to be explored with practitioners and parents and children. You know, it's important that that's part of the process, I think.
Absolutely. And I think in order to bring those barriers down, like for every project, it's so important to have that really clear aim and be really clear of what your drivers are and how you will achieve that. Was that something that you found was helpful when it came to looking at what those barriers were, how to roll it out on a wider scale, how to make sure you had the right people in place to help you roll that project out? Or was that something that came perhaps a little bit later after you started to do some of that initial sort of test of change work almost within your original setting?
Yeah, so definitely, you know, from that original project, there were other things I wanted to look at, you know, sort of clarify the aims of what I was trying to do. So, and what I was trying to do was give visibility and representation to LGBT plus parents and carers in early learning childcare settings. And the drivers that were sort of going around that, meant that I had to work with practitioners, and we had to look at our interactions in the playroom. We had to involve parents as partners. We had to look at children's experiences and the resources that were available to them, and we also had to look at the playroom environment as well, because it's only through a combination of these factors that we can really address change properly. One of the outcomes of the projects that I was doing was that I created a LGBT education in early learning childcare. I made an infographic of features of highly effective practice, and I'm going to go through those features now. There were 6 main sort of points, and it should give an idea of actually what kind of practical things I did. So the first thing that was important was practitioner training. And it was really important to have opportunities for open and honest discussion, because when you start talking about LGBT plus education in early years, there are a lot of thoughts that maybe it's not appropriate, or that children are too young. Staff might have personal reasons, they might not feel confident around these issues, they might just not think that it's something that they, as a practitioner, have got any responsibility for. It might be parents' responsibility. So it can, when it's seen through that lens, what actually happens is nothing gets done about it. And that is kind of the situation that we're in early learning childcare. It's seen as not appropriate for early learning childcare. So trying to get through that was an important part of it. And this training is about supporting families and supporting children, and that is all it's about. So you have to give practitioners a sort of arena to have those questions and be able to explain to them that you do have LGBT parents coming through the door, and they might have specific barriers around their life experiences or the experiences of being a parent that we as early learning childcare providers, we need to be cognizant of. So that's the first element. The second element was really important to work with parents and carers in a very similar vein, because parents and carers may also share the same kind of concerns or questions, or be curious about what LGBT plus education would mean in an early learning childcare settings. So I did do parent information sessions where it was similar to the practitioners. I answered questions. I tried to explain that it was about supporting families. And when I've been doing that, there have been LGBT plus parents that have come along, and their feedback has been really good as well, because they feel very included in the setting when you do that. And the parents were able to see the storybooks and see that it was just about different kinds of families. So involving your parents and stuff like that is a really crucial part of it. And we also produced information leaflets and stuff like that. So parents felt involved in it, and any questions that they had, we were able to answer. The third part of it was to look at the environment and to ensure that we were having a gender neutral environment, and that that's tying in with best practice from things like Realising the Ambition and the Care Inspectorate Guide to Gender Neutral Play Environments. And what we want to do with this project and what we want to do with a gender neutral play environment is to expand children's worldviews and their horizons of what is possible for them. We want to, we don't want them just to, unfortunately, the research shows that children are very aware of gender stereotypes, and sometimes unwittingly, practitioners, adults and teachers can re-emphasize those stereotypes without even realising. So it's about, sort of bringing to light some unexamined beliefs about, what life can be like and what jobs you can do and different things like that. And also part of that is also, in terms of the LGBT stuff, is, giving children stories and resources which aren't just heterosexual families, because that's usually what you just see. You see the mum, you see the dad, so children are getting a narrow view of what can constitute a family. And the other flip side of that is if you do have any children who have LGBT plus parents, they need to see their family experiences represented in stories as well, because there's research that shows that when that doesn't happen, they can internalize sort of feelings about shame and about being different and feeling ostracized. And so it really needs to have good visibility in terms of your environment and your resources. The other part of it, which was appropriate for early and childcare, was because it's a play-based environment where learning takes place as a result of really good high-quality interactions with the adults. Practitioners had to become a little bit aware of how they were going about their interactions. So were they letting stereotypical play happen in front of them, or were they able to intervene in a way that was positive for the children? You know, for example, if it's in the house corner, you know, they could be saying, well, you can actually have two mums here. You know, why don't I give you a storybook about that? And actually, that is what, you know, Jimmy's family's like, or something like that, you know, using a real life example. And that's a really key part of it. We want to have practitioners to have the confidence to do that, rather than thinking just being silent about that, because practitioners, parents, managers, everybody has positive attitudes towards LGBT plus people on a personal level, but when it comes to actually action or practice as in the professional way, you know, they might not have the confidence to do it because of those things. They might not feel it's appropriate. So you know, it all feeds together. It goes back to the training to up the confidence of people to say, this is okay, this is about families, and this is why we're doing it. And the final kind of part of that would be, you know, to constantly self-evaluate, to constantly reflect, you know, to analyse practice. And again, going back to the children and the families and getting their feedback, and, you know, ensuring that everybody's included at all times. And since I've been doing this training, I've had lots of different phone calls from, you know, people across South Lanarkshire who are getting questions now from parents who are LGBT plus, and the parents are saying, how do you go about this in your setting? How are you going to support my child? How can my family be visible here? And you know, that will only increase because there are more and more families that are presenting in that way to our settings. So and I have to say, you know, it's been really positive when I've done it. You know, it's parents and children and practitioners are all very positive once you can kind of open up these discussions and people aren't scared about it. And it's breaking the silence around it all, really. That's the main thing.
Yeah, and you've mentioned a couple of times here the importance of engaging with your parents and your practitioners. And it was, I suppose, for some people, a lot of it was confidence, but for some people it's that unknown of how do they then continue those conversations at home, and how do they make sure they're having those really positive conversations with their own young people. How did you initiate that engagement with parents? Because it is something that's a little bit unknown for a lot of people, and it's not maybe something you'd automatically think would be addressed in early years settings. So how did you initiate those engagement sessions and discussions with parents, bringing their parents on board, as this has developed over the past couple of years?
Yeah. So initially we sent a letter out to the parents, just kind of a very brief explanation of what we were trying to achieve, and this is what we were going to be doing. And along with that letter, there was an invitation for them to come along to an information evening, which parents did attend. And you know, the thinking behind it was to, you know, obviously treat parents as respectfully as possible and listen to their views and listen to any of the questions that they had. And you know, you're also trying to explain to them why you're doing it, and explain to them that there might be some myths around what they think it might be, and, you know, to try and show them the reality of what it actually is. And we also provided information leaflets for them, and I collected feedback. And actually what I ended up doing was I interviewed the practitioners, and I interviewed some of the parents, and I also recorded conversations with some of the children. And I tried to use the information that I got from those conversations to really identify what parents might be concerned about, and the best ways of going about trying to overcome any concerns that they had. But generally, parents were more than happy once it was explained to. And actually, a lot of parents didn't even come to the information evening. They just sent back their form, with positive feedback saying, I'm so glad my children's getting a chance to learn about this. I wish we had got a chance to learn about it when we were at nursery and at school and stuff like that as well. So, but I think I'm glad you brought it up, because it is the fear of what a parent's reaction might be is enough to maybe make settings not want to go near it. So a really clear message I'd like to give from this podcast today is that it's a positive thing to do with parents. It really is. And parents, we're living now in the 21st century in Scotland, and we all want Scotland to be the best place to grow up. And we're getting lots of messages about celebrating diversity, all the great work that's happening in primary, all the great work that's happening in secondary, and plus, LGBT education as part of the curriculum now, and the curriculum starts at age 3. So, early learning childcare settings do need to take steps towards doing a bit around visibility representation for LGBT plus people, I think, in their settings.
Yeah, and I'm sure anybody who's got their own children will know they're the most honest group of people you can find. So to have the children involved in that feedback as well is a really good way to capture their understanding, and I suppose being able to then monitor that as things are changing and understand where some of those kind of early outcomes are and how they're responding to it within that play-based environment. You mentioned that the project started back in 2018. A lot's happened since then. Do you have any kind of early indications of outcomes of it so far? Is it something that you think will continue to evolve, or do you think you found a model that works really well based on outcomes that you've already got, or is there anything else you think perhaps needs a little bit of, I don't know, looking at something in a little bit different, in a different light, or how are things looking with everything kind of to date?
I think the outcomes have been really good. I mean, this year I have delivered training to the 4, practitioners across all early learning childcare settings, including partner providers across the 4 localities, and also childminders. And I've collected feedback from people that have undertaken that training, and it's all been really positive, and it's all been along the lines of, this is new to me, but I totally understand it, or this will impact my practice. This is great. I can't wait to take this back to settings. Also from some LGBT colleagues that are working in settings, who understand themselves from their own personal lives about how kind of important this is. So the feedback's always been really positive about that. And yeah, I think the model works. I think there may be an issue around when I am talking about getting practitioners and parents and different things on board. There may be some people that I know I can go and talk to parents and practitioners about that. And sometimes I wonder, would it be a barrier if people weren't as confident about some of the issues and didn't, and so that's why I want to try and expand what I have been doing across as much as I can. So I'm actually working with TAI just now to create an early years module. They've got a primary module and a secondary module. So we're trying to work on an early years module that would be available across Scotland. And doing things like this with yourself, with the improvement service and publishing the case study, trying to get the message out there, and trying to share as many sort of ways of overcoming barriers as possible. And I am always available if anybody wants to get in contact with me. I work in South Lanarkshire, so it would be fine to share my email or whatever. And I would love to see, practitioners and other local authorities trying to do something with this, and taking it forward. I definitely do think the issue mostly is just the initial issue that I was coming across. It's that kind of breaking the silence about it and breaking the sort of perceived fear that it's going to be very controversial or something like that. And that's, I don't know, that's just something that people need to try and tackle themselves.
Yeah, and it's so refreshing to see and hear, I suppose, the real positive response that this has had within South Lanarkshire, and I think taking the learning that you've managed to pull together so far and showing that actually there is a little bit of resistance, but that tends to happen with most projects and change. It's not something that comes naturally to a lot of people. So to be able to guide them through that and evidence the work that you've done and actually how it's had real positive impacts, and for not just children in your settings, but for those who are practitioners or their parents as well, should hopefully make people feel a little bit more confident about being able to do something similar within their own areas. Now, you've just mentioned work on developing a module for the curriculum for early years. Obviously, we're continuing to work together. We've got a learning event next year, but any next steps for you? What are you thinking about doing sort of beyond the curriculum module? Have you thought that far in advance? Do you think there's scope for this to continue to grow, or what would you like to see happen with it?
I definitely don't want the momentum of it to kind of stop. You know, I feel I think when I think back to that initial time of doing it and sort of wondering, will this, you know, will my deputy in my head even agree to me even doing this on a very slight local, you know, tiny way? And then it's grown to all of this, all these different avenues, which is amazing. And yeah, I don't think the momentum can stop because we're not where we want to be. You know, it's my kind of vision that walking into any kind of nursery across Scotland, I would see, you know, in their storybook corner, some stories with a great diversity of families. I might see some diversity posters showing diversity around the place, and practitioners that understand, you know, the sort of specific barriers, especially around LGBT stuff, because that's what this project is about. That would be amazing. You know, in 10 years' time, that it's just become part and parcel of early years education, and parents and carers don't need to phone up and say, what are you doing to support my child? Because it's clear when they go in their walk round, it's obvious, you know. So I suppose I don't know, have a specific next step of what I'm going to do after the learning events and stuff like that, but I certainly won't be giving up going forward with it in any way that I can, basically.
I don't think anybody would let you give up. I know certainly from the discussions that I've had with some of the central ELC team in South Lanarkshire, they're all so passionate about it as well. So I think there's definitely lots of support there for you. So, and of course, we are just delighted to be able to work with you on this as well. Well, thank you so much, David. It's been so lovely to talk to you this afternoon, and you've just again really shone a light on something that is so important. And I'm just so pleased that we're able to share your experience with the practitioners and settings right across Scotland. So thank you so much again.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Emma. Thanks for all your help and support.
Thank you for listening. If you have any questions about the topics discussed in this recording, or if you're interested in taking part in the series, please do not hesitate to get in touch. More details and contact information can be found on the Improvement Service website.